fall is really starting to set in here, and so I'm doing a little rodent work today. Customer acquired a new building. They store a lot of their, toys, think camper, RV, boats, things like that in this pole building, and so they wanted to make sure that it's protected when it comes to mice and rats. So I'll give you kind of the lay of the land and explain some First and foremost, we're looking at, the corner edge here of a building. We've got a gas meter. That hole is pretty tight, so they're not going to enter through there, but we're just looking at where is a mouse or a rat first going to approach this building. It's going to be along an edge, and so we want to intercept them as there's fields and stuff all around this. So that's a good start. So we'll set that up on one of the corners. Then when you walk down, got kind of an overhanging area here. So anytime you have sort of a carport overhanging area, these mice, they can get away from anything that's going to eat them above, like think hawks, predators, things like that. So yeah, we've got some areas back here, but I chose to sit it right here. For one, they're going to be moving equipment in and out throughout this, and so I kind of want it out of the way with the blocks being here. They'll be forced to move these blocks. They'll recognize this is here, so they won't get smashed if they're pulling this out. The other thing is, if you put it up against the back of this building, many times things can get squished as they push belongings, tractors, tractor parts, snow plow, things like that up against the building. So I try and keep them where I've got a buffer. So again, I've got a big kind of parking lot over to a fence row area, so we're going to intercept there. So that kind of covers this side of the building here. Along the back, I'm not as concerned. On the interior of the building, we've already put rodent stations on each side of every major entry door. So inside there's actually 6 rodent stations, particularly for mice. Those are going to be contingency stations essentially. So these stations out here are going to be the primary workhorses. They're going to intercept anything mice and rats. And then if anything makes it inside, then we have contingency stations on the inside as backup. And so another thing we always like to do is we like to walk around and look. So yeah, it's been hit, but you can see that garage seal is actually nice and flush to the ground. That's great. So that's not a highway. Same thing over here. Again, not a highway. So these are things we'll also look at when we're inspecting. How has previous activity been on this property? And not seeing those rubber seals rounded, which you'll often see, tells me that there probably hasn't been a ton of pressure. Then you look over here, we've got a pond. So we've got a water source, within 20 yards of this building. And so I chose to set another station here, just because if they're going to go out there and get water as it's freezing, and there's, tag, 8 blocks of bait in there. Again, we are close to railroad tracks and such, and so rats are always a concern. I don't think there will be rats here, but I will put some extra bait out just in case we do have some rat activity. But again, yeah, the pond over there with a little bit of water, they come across the drive as they go to get in for the winter. They could find their way in. There are some areas such as that can be shored up for sure. Exclusion work is something additional that we do offer, but in this scenario, wasn't asked for, and quite honestly, the inside of the building actually looked fairly well. There weren't that many mouse droppings or anything, and so since I didn't see that many mouse droppings or anything, and it sat vacant for around a year or so before they took this over, I believe, and so that's another just sort of inspection. Identification is key. It's one of the main factors in our industry. And but yeah, putting rodent stations out for a building of this size, not real hard. It's not genius level work, but there are some nuances to it, some things I've learned over the years. But man, it's cold. 33 this morning here in northern Indiana. Beautiful though. But yeah, just how we go about placing rodent stations when it comes to rodent control for mice and rats here in northern Indiana on regular buildings like this. And then what we do as part of our service is we have a 2-week follow-up. So I'll place these, I will come back, check all the stations here around 2 to 3 weeks, and then we'll adjust accordingly. One station didn't have any activity, but 2 stations, all the bait's gone. then we'll move some stations around, see what we find, see what we missed. And that provides a pretty good service. I really like the 2 to 3 week follow-up. It kind of helps us prove our work, and if we're wrong, and we make adjustments. So, and then they're set up all the way through until February, March, until those critters start moving again, and then we do our spring services. So, yeah, that's rodent control. So wrapping things up here, I'm doing the paperwork for what for the rodent stations I just put out here. And so on the exterior stations, we put 8 bait blocks per station. And again, that is because of the potentiality of rats. We are close to a railroad track that is used. And in my experience, anytime you're around dairy farms, railroad stations, there's a potentiality for rats. And so that's why we've got 8 blocks in each of those stations. And then in the interior stations, we had 6 stations inside. So we've got 9 stations on site, which totaled up to 42 bait blocks. And that might seem like a lot, but you know, this building's a 60 by 40, 60 by 50 building with that outside lean-to. And so I could have added a couple more stations, really. So this is nowhere near overkill. And each bait block is going to kill about 2 to 5 mice. We'll kill about half of that on rats. 1 to 4 is typically what I hear with this bait. And so we will come back in 2 to 3 weeks. We will check this bait. If we need to reshuffle stations, maybe I missed something, or if a bait station gets cleaned out, for example, on the inside, maybe the mice have already moved inside. And those interior stations are going to do a lot of the work because there were already some mice inside, and those exterior stations don't get hit as much. That's something we find, and that's why we like to come back at that 2 to 3 week time frame, because we're very good, but we're not perfect. And so I could have missed something. The mice could have already moved. You know, I'm looking across the street. Crops have already been picked. It's late October. A lot of these mice and rats are already moving. They've already moved towards those crawl spaces, garages, pole buildings. And so having those interior stations at those key points as well is important. And then those exterior stations are going to continue to be a workhorse throughout the winter. If things come and go, we get these warm-ups in the spring, that bait will still be good. So when it warms up, if things start to move out again in the late winter, you know, early February, we get some of those 40, 50 degree days. Those mice will start to maybe go forage again, forage for acorns, forage for other food as their food stores run low. And if they come to this building and they might find that bait. And so now we're intercepting anything that might come towards the building. And so just a brief rundown. There's kind of a lot of, oh my goodness, rodenticide in our industry, you know, and everyone laments secondary kill and killing owls and eagles and birds of prey. And, oh, well, it's because those guys, you're putting too much bait out. And, you know, we do everything by the book per the label. Label is the law. And on a site like this where I've got 42 bait blocks, I could have easily added probably another 2 or 3 exterior stations and maybe 1 or 2 interior if I really wanted to. But in my opinion, that would be overkill. And so, just a brief rundown of rodent control here in the fall for mice and rats. Thank you. Checking rodent stations along these pole buildings here. So I open the station, boom, activity. So there you can see some nesting material from a mouse. You can see some mouse droppings right there. You see how they're colored blue. That's from feeding on this bait. This bait will has an active in it, and it will turn their feces blue. Helps really figure out, hey, are they feeding on my bait or not? And then you literally can just find their blue feces. So as you can see, those bait blocks are rounded. I'll show you a new one. So there's a new one next to a chewed on one. So updated the station here. Yep, we'll empty this out, get all this. But yeah, some poor mouse was setting up shop here. This is going to be their winter hangout because they've got food, water, everything, and they ate the wrong food.